What's up, everyone? Nick Shaw here with RP Strength, Renaissance Periodization, getting ready to kick off the webinar for caffeine and kilos. Just going to give it a minute or two to let people get in here, and then we can get going. So, if everyone can hear me, just let me know. I see one thumbs up. We're probably pretty good to go. We already tested this, but if there's anything that you can't hear or see, please let me know. Let me just make sure it's not too close up on my face. All right. So today's webinar video is going to be all about nutrition for performance and body composition changes. So that means if you want to diet to lose fat, if you want to diet to gain muscle, if you want to diet to maintain your body weight, and just increase your performance, we can do all those things. And Danny, thank you for the comment, my friend. It looks like we're good to go. All right. So, again, we're talking specifically more for athletic purposes today, more so than just general health. And while the two tend to go together quite a bit, there are some subtle differences there. Maybe talk about that a little bit. And so, my plan for today is to sort of chat about the nutritional priorities for about a half hour or so. And after that, going to open it up to some questions. So if you want to chat in some questions throughout, feel free. Otherwise, you can just sort of save them until the end when we do question and answer, and then you can just type them in. And as I see them pop up, I'll just kind of go ahead and knock them out. But if I'm kind of rambling on a little bit and something pops up, yeah, I might steer off track a little bit. So I'm going to try to save most of the questions for the end. All right. So it looks like we've got a handful of people on, which is cool to see. I believe this will be recorded for later, but we're going to dive right in. And so hopefully most people are familiar with myself, with RP Strength. We're the official dietitians of USA Powerlifting, of USA Weightlifting. We work with a lot of CrossFit athletes such as Rich Froning, Annie Thorstadter, Lauren Fisher. We also work with Maddie Rogers, a bunch of different athletes like that. We all help them with their nutrition. And so we've been doing this for a while. Well, we've been around since I think going on 8 years now, so quite a while. And we started with basically just one-on-one coaching that morphed into diet templates, which morphed into more recently now our app. I can maybe talk about that a little bit later, but I won't bore people too much with that, and we'll just kind of dive right in. But that's a little bit of the backstory of RP. Been doing this for a while. I've known the guys at Caffeine and Kilos for a really long time now. It's really really great guys. Danny reached out to set this up, so really appreciate that. All right, so nutritional priorities. What does that mean? Well, as you can imagine, there's a million different things about nutrition out there. You can just Google it. Say, what's the best diet to lose fat, lose weight? You'll get literally 1 billion results that'll pop up. And people say all sorts of different stuff. You can't eat carbs, you can't eat fats, you can't eat protein. You're like, I don't even know what the heck to eat, because people seemingly love to say you can't eat X, Y, Z. And that tends to be the default for most people. And that's not necessarily the best way to approach it. The best way to approach it is hopefully sort through all the evidence out there and break things down into a simple, easy to follow manner that also, just gets people the best results. And that's really at the end of the day what we're after, is just the best results in a simple and straightforward manner. So again, we've got a team of 20 PhDs, 5 registered dietitians. They do all that stuff, and they kind of pass it along. Again, we have all sorts of books if you want to educate yourself more. This is a great place to start with this webinar, but actually I have it sitting right next to me. But if you really want a deep dive, Renaissance Diet 2.0 is a book. You can get on Amazon or whatever. That's gonna go way more in depth than I can today in just an hour, but it just gives a good overview of the nutritional priorities. So what are they? Again, we have to start with, above all else, dietary adherence. So I always like to make training analogies. And so the best training analogy is, if you have someone that is training 5 times a week versus someone that's training once or twice a week, who's going to get better results? Well, the person training 5 times a week, because they're more consistent. So at the end of the day, consistency is king. It's what matters most. That's what I mean by dietary adherence. So you can literally have the best diet in the world, But if your clients or members cannot stick to it, it's not going to be very successful. Just as simple as that. And again, it's just like the person that doesn't come into the gym to train very often. Well, you're not going to do very well. You're not going to get very good results. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So that's kind of the main thing. And what we like to do is, again, we're going to educate. We're going to give people a lot of knowledge, and knowledge is power. So if you sort of know all the nutritional priorities, you can, if you hear something out there, someone's talking about nutrition and they're like, hey, I heard that you can't eat after 6 p.m., or, whatever sort of crazy myth there is. And there's going to be a bunch of them that you might hear. If you know all the priorities, you can sort of sit back and think and go, does that really make sense? And when you have more knowledge, you can approach it like that and you say, hey, you know what? Well, that tends to violate, the first couple of nutritional priorities, and that doesn't seem to make sense. So you can start to look at it with less emotion tied to it and more logic and reasoning behind it. And when you can do that, you're probably going to be better off. And that goes for many more things besides just nutrition, but we're going to keep the scope here just nutrition. So dietary adherence is super critical, and this is something that I learned over the years myself. I've had the pleasure to work with a lot of top athletes, and I would get really fired up when I had the chance to write, nutrition plans for literally the best athletes in the world. I would be like, man, I'm so excited. I'm going to write them literally the perfect diet, like down to the minute, down to the gram. If they're training multiple times a day, I'm going to go super detailed into things, and it's going to be like perfectly timed around their schedule. And I thought what I was doing was I was helping them in the best manner that I could. Because again, if people are paying for a service, like that's what you want. You want to give them the best and most precise nutrition plan that you can. And it took me a while to catch on to this, but even at the elite levels, what I tended to miss was I was being so precise that they were sort of missing the compliance and consistency aspect because it would almost be too overwhelming for them. And I didn't catch it the first time. I didn't catch it the second time. But by about the third time I started working with really high level people, I started to realize that there was a little give and take. And this is what I like to talk about is the art of coaching and the science of nutrition. You have to combine the two and you have to blend them together. Because if you write someone just the absolute quote unquote perfect diet, but they can't stick to it, it doesn't really help them. And in fact, it might hurt them because they might get stressed out thinking about it and they might not end up following it. And again, if consistency is key, that's what we want above all else. So again, you have to be able to kind of meet people in the middle. And again, if you have the knowledge to combine and blend the two, the art and the science, you're going to be a whole lot better off in the long run. So again, that's sort of something I've learned over the years. And, if anyone follows Rich Froning, he sort of does somewhat of a fasted thing, and people say, "Oh, well, that doesn't really work with RP." Well, that's not necessarily true. I've worked with him, and again, we focus on the nutritional priorities first, and timing, as we'll talk about a little bit later, is much less important than something like calorie balance and macronutrients, and so we get those two first, and the timing aspect matters quite a bit less. So again, adherence is key. You have to be able to create a nutrition plan for people that they're actually going to follow. Again, if you write people the perfect training program that's like perfectly periodized, all that good stuff, but if you're writing it for someone that doesn't even care about that stuff, they have very basic goals, they might not ever get started because it's too overwhelming for them. So you have to keep all that stuff in mind when you think about consistency and adherence. So that's number one. So before we dive a little bit into calorie balance, which is the main nutritional priority, we're going to talk a little bit about what I think goes into adherence as well, and that's sort of the mindset of dieting and sort of goal setting. So again, a lot of people, and maybe this isn't quite as true for dieting for athletic purposes, but sometimes it is people tend to procrastinate. And if they need to diet for a competition, they tend to think that, oh, well, why do it 4 or 5 months out if I can just wait until the last month to do it? Maybe not the best plan. And so people need to be a little bit more realistic with their goals. So again, if you're trying to cut for a specific competition, you actually want to diet as far away from the competition as you can, right? And the reason that you do this is because you don't want to have to be cutting your calories, cutting your carbs, and all that stuff right up before the meet. You actually want to give yourself several weeks or a month, maybe even 2 months in an ideal world, where you don't have to cut any calories and you can just train at a maintenance level. And so again, do it further away. And this goes back into goal setting and just being a little bit more realistic because, again, do it earlier, get yourself in shape, and then you can maintain into a meet. You're going to perform a lot better on the day of the competition. So hopefully that's a no-brainer, but it's something that people tend to overlook quite a bit. And so again, if you are more dieting just to lose weight overall, what tends to happen is we live in a society where people want instant results, immediate gratification. Everyone wants it. Who wants to diet for 4 months if you can get the same results in 1 month or, less than a month? It's not realistic, of course, but again, that's sort of the mindset out there, and especially if you work with more general population folks, it's what you're going to see all the time. All right, well, I just want to cut my carbs and I want to lose 15 pounds in a month rather than doing it slow and steady and actually losing, body fat, actually losing, the quote unquote bad tissue. Again, have to set realistic goals. And it's tough, but you have to be able to convince people that you need to think more long term versus just the short term because you're going to be better off. Again, if you rush, the faster you lose weight, typically, the faster it's going to come back on. And if you're a strength athlete, the faster you lose weight, the more likely you are to lose strength and lose performance. So there's a reason, if you think of the tortoise and the hare, that you want to be the turtle. You want to be the tortoise. You want to move slow and steady when you're trying to lose weight. Again, sort of gradually go down, not these big, spikes up and down. You generally want to avoid that. And something that I found really interesting when it comes to goal setting is the idea of people set goals when they are really, really motivated. And they don't tend to think about the hard work that's going to come with it. I can sit here and say, hey, you know what? I want to lose 20 pounds and I want to get stronger and all this stuff. I can make these goals because I'm sitting here, fairly motivated and I'm not actually in the middle of the process that requires all that hard work. So again, this is something kind of called the false hope syndrome. People set goals in this state without realizing the amount of work that it actually takes to achieve your goals. So for example, in the RP Diet app, when you go to set up your goals and you're like, hey, I want to lose 15 pounds in 10 weeks. The app's going to tell you based on your body weight and how much percent body weight you're losing per week. It's going to tell you if this is a moderate goal, if this is a hard goal, or if it's a very aggressive goal. So that way people have some sort of knowledge beforehand of, hey, if I set a really aggressive goal, I need to come into it with the expectation that it's going to be very hard, right? It's going to take an incredible amount of willpower, sacrifice to achieve those goals. But if you set more realistic goals, go a little bit slower and steadier, your chances of achieving your goals actually go up quite a bit. And we have some really cool data science now from the app, from like literally thousands and thousands of completed diets that tends to suggest that the people with the best results go a little bit slower and steadier throughout. So it's pretty cool, interesting to see. And again, we're now starting to we've sort of always known this intuitively from working with clients one-on-one and just from hearing about people using the templates. But now we have the actual data science from the app to back that up and to support it that, well, this actually does work out, that the slower and steadier you go, the better results you'll get. So again, be realistic when it comes to setting goals. Yes, everyone wants to gain 100 pounds on their, snatch and clean and jerk overnight and lose, 20 pounds of body fat and gain 10 pounds of muscle. Unfortunately, we're all human. That just doesn't exist. That is not possible. So again, start with the right mindset and you're going to be much better off in the long term. So again, that all kind of ties into adherence. Now we're going to move to calorie balance. So again, this is probably about 50% of your diet success. Calorie balance. What does it mean? How many calories you're eating versus how many calories you're burning. If you want to maintain your weight, they need to be about even. If you want to gain weight, you need to be consuming more over time. If you want to lose weight, you need to create that deficit a little bit. And now that deficit can come from eating less or it can come from expending more energy. Maybe you start walking more or you're more active or you're training more, whatever it is. Usually a combination of the two is probably going to be best. Maybe for strength athletes, you want to ease off the cardio because especially more high intensity cardio, if you get into too much of that, you might see some strength trade-offs that might not be okay for strength athletes. So again, calorie balance, really important. It's sort of like the engine to your car. If you have everything else right, you have the perfect macro breakdown, the best timing, the best supplements, the highest quality food, but if you want to lose weight and you're not creating that calorie deficit, it's like having a really nice car without an engine in it. You're just not going to go anywhere. Your weight's going to stay stable. So again, you have to be able to slowly lower your calories along the way to get best results if you want to lose fat. Inverse would be true if you want to gain weight. Again, there's a reason that we don't want to cut too fast. We don't want to gain, add in too much because you might gain too much fat Or if you cut calories too fast, you're going to see a drop in your performance levels. So again, calorie balance. What's an easy way to sort of track it? If you are using some type of app, even like MyFitnessPal, it's a good idea to sort of get establish a baseline for yourself of, hey, I'm going to track for a week and see about how many calories I'm eating. And then you start tracking your body weight to go along with that. And usually a couple times a week, you're going to start to notice if you're consistently eating more, you're in a surplus, your body weight's going to slowly creep up. If it's consistently about the same, now again, there's going to be fluctuations, of course, because of water weight. Especially if you're female, you're going to see lots of this if you are female. Just something that you have to keep in mind. Again, you track a couple times a week your body weight, keep the averages. If the averages are going up or down, that's a pretty good indicator of how many calories you're eating. If it's consistently going down, well, then you're in a deficit. So that's kind of the cheat sheet way to do it. Again, you can get into more advanced calculations and all that. Like something like the RP Diet, RP Diet 2.0 book is a great thing. Our YouTube channel, has lots of free videos as well if you really want to dive into a little bit more. But that's kind of the overriding, in a nutshell, approach. So 50% of your diet success. After that, we move to macronutrients. How much protein, how much carbs, how much fats are you eating? It's about 30% of your diet success. So just between those two, you're looking at 80% of your diet success. So if you're relatively new to dieting, you want to start with those first two, right? And again, we go back to training analogies. If you're a coach, you're a trainer or something like that, and someone walks into your gym, they're not used to lifting. Would you ever have them snatch the first day in the gym? Probably not. They're going to look really funky. They don't even know basic movement patterns. You're probably going to want to teach them the basics first. Same thing applies in nutrition. Focus on calorie balance, focus on your macronutrients first, get those dialed in, then you can start to focus on the more minor details. Again, the timing, supplements, food quality, which we'll briefly touch on today. But again, it's like start with the foundation of the pyramid, and then you can slowly work your way up to the more minor details. So what does macronutrients mean? We're going to start with protein, number one. It's the most important, especially for strength athletes, especially for performance. There's always ranges to go by, but for today's talk, we only have an hour, maybe even less than that if we want to do a bunch of questions. General rule of thumb, about 1 gram per pound of body weight. If you weigh 200 pounds, you're probably going to be consuming about 200 grams of protein per day. If you have higher body fat percentage, you can probably skew that down to 0.8 and be totally fine, right? So if you're above, 20, 25, 30% body fat, you might want to go with that 0.8 number. You can go as low as 0.6. That's probably the minimum that you'd want to go. And again, you don't really want to go outside of that range, 0.6 up to 0.1, because if you start going over that amount, you start overeating protein, you have to give up some carbs or fats as a trade-off there, because we can't eat infinite calories, unfortunately. So that's protein. Carbs, number 2. Carbs are really important, especially for strength and performance athletes, because they literally fuel your performance. They help you recover, provide glycogen so you can keep training. It's really important, especially if you want to keep your performance, keep performing well into a cut as well. So it's not something that you typically want to cut first when you start a diet, because you don't want to see your performance sink in the gym. So again, carbs are tied to activity levels. So if you are someone that is not very active, right? You work a desk job and maybe you're not training on a given day, you can imagine your carb intake is quite a bit lower than someone that's training multiple times a day. Someone like Rich Froning, his carbohydrate intake's way up here, right? It's a lot higher. So for most people, if you're just training an hour a day, maybe 1 gram per pound of body weight is a good starting point for carbs. If you are a pretty serious weightlifter, a lot of caffeine and kilos folks probably are, you're training 90 minutes, 2 hours pretty consistently, 4, 5, 6 times a week, maybe like 1.5, 2 grams per pound of body weight for your carbohydrate intake is a decent starting point. And again, these are all starting points. You need to play around with it a little bit and figure it out for yourself. And again, based on your progress, again, tracking your body weight, you start to tweak and manipulate all these things. Again, so it kind of has a wide range there. Again, the less active you are, the fewer carbs you'll need to eat. The more active you are, the more carbs you'll need to eat. So, someone like Rich Froning could probably eat 2.5, 3 grams per pound of body weight, and he'd be totally fine. So that's carbs. Fats. Fats are number 3. It's not to say they are not important, but when it comes to dieting for strength and performance, they are not quite as important as the other two. So this is good news because it gives us 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. So if you reduce 1 gram of fat from your diet, you're going to drop about 9 calories versus carbs and proteins are only 4 calories per gram, which is cool because it gives you a lot more leeway. And if you need to create that energy deficit by slowly reducing your calories, well, fat's a pretty good spot to start. That's good news because fats don't tend to impact your performance or your strength, so it gives you a lot of wiggle room, a lot of leeway there. So typically we're going to start by cutting your fats down first. And again, as you sort of start to stall out later on, you might also reduce your carb intake, but hopefully it's not going to be the first thing that you would cut calories from. So fat intake can vary quite a bit. Again, if you're trying to gain weight, it can be something where you start increasing your fat intake a lot as well because they tend to be pretty easy to eat. Think of like something like olive oil. You can put that on a salad. How easy is that to get in several hundred calories? You don't even realize you're eating it. Very, very easy to do. The lowest you're probably going to want to go on fat intake is about 0.3 grams per pound of body weight. And that it is on the low side, and it's not something that you probably want to do for a very long time. Again, maybe at the tail end of a diet, you could do that for 2 4 weeks, something like that. Probably don't want to go too far beyond that, because fats are really there to help your hormone general health overall. So again, we don't want to, and again, this all ties back into the idea where you don't want to diet for extended periods of time, more than like 2 or 3 months. You start going past that, you're going to start seeing diminishing returns. You might get burnt out. Your chances of rebounding back up are going to go up quite a bit. So again, slow, steady, and set periods of time. We don't want to diet indefinitely. We want to keep it sort of 2 to 3 month periods. And again, that's also going to help for strength and performance as well. So that's macros. Again, between the two of those, you're looking at about 80% of your diet success. So start there, focus on the basics first before you go into other areas. Moving on to those other areas now. Nutrient timing has 2 parts. We're going to call this about 10% of your dieting success. Not super important, but again, it's not to say that it's not important at all. Nutrient timing does matter a little bit, just not as much as the other two. So what does this mean? So meal frequency, how often should you be eating each day? We're going to keep it pretty simple and straightforward so we can get through everything today in 30, 40 minutes before questions. As long as you're awake, if you're eating every like 4 hours or so, roughly, you're on the right track. For most people, that's anywhere from like 3 to 5 meals a day. Pretty standard stuff, nothing too crazy there. You don't need to eat 7 or 8 meals per day. There's no real benefits that are going to come from that. Yeah, eating too infrequently, you're sort of just playing, you're not consuming protein consistently throughout the day. That's sort of the trade-off there, which leads to most people asking about intermittent fasting, which is almost always a question that comes up. Intermittent fasting is okay, but again, if you focus on the basics first, you focus on calorie balance, you focus on your macronutrient intake, it's okay. It's just not quite optimal. Typically, we like to suggest if you eat in the morning, well, again, if you're not eating at night because you're sleeping, I don't know too many people that get up in the middle of the night to eat. It's pretty crazy. What you need is you need to ingest some form of protein, amino acids. So again, having a breakfast is good for that. I always like to tell people if you don't like to eat in the morning, I'm not a big morning eating person either, have a protein shake and some coffee, combine the two. Quick, simple, if you need to get out on the road to get to work or take your kids to school or whatever it is, even though kids aren't going to school right now because of all the craziness. Again, simple and easy, and it gives you kind of the best of both worlds. You're getting a little bit of something in your system, and you're not going all day. The other reason I would say not to intermittent fast is if you train in the morning, it's just not a good idea. Unless you're eating afterwards, then it's a little bit better. But if you're someone that trains at 8 in the morning and you're not starting to eat until 12 or 2, that's just not going to be ideal, especially for strength athletes, especially for performance. If you want optimal results, well, just eat more spread out throughout the day. You're probably going to be better off. So that's meal frequency. Nutrient timing also means timing the macronutrients around when you train. So again, pretty simple and straightforward rules of thumb here. Eat more carbohydrates around when you train is a good rule of thumb. And as you get further away from training, you can back down on the carbs and you can maybe increase your fat intake a little bit. You don't want to eat a lot of fat around when you're training because it tends to slow down digestion. I always like to give the example of imagine eating a piece of pizza before you go in and train a CrossFit workout or a really hard weightlifting workout. Boy, that doesn't seem like a great idea. Hopefully that's common sense. You know, you don't want something that's going to set heavy in your stomach while you're trying to train really hard. Because you want stuff, especially after training, you want stuff to get into your system, into your body really fast. And so again, if you eat fewer fats around training, it helps get things into your system faster. We'll talk a little bit about supplements here at the end of the nutritional priorities, and that ties into this as well. But you know, again, I always like to think of a bell curve sort of shaped around training. That's when you want to eat a little bit more of your carbohydrates. All right, so that's nutrient timing, 10%, so you're at 90% now. So 50% calorie balance, 30% macros, 10% nutrient timing. Now we move into the last two little slivers that are not super important for body composition and performance. Food quality, food composition, however you want to think of it. Simple, straightforward way is the types of protein you're eating, so incomplete versus complete sources. Complete sources of protein tend to be all of your animal sources, so meats, dairy, things like that. Whey protein, casein protein, again, all sort of come from animal sources. If you are vegetarian, if you are vegan, no worries. You can still get in lots of good quality protein. You just need maybe things like soy, tofu. There's, you know, what are some other options? You know, quinoa tends to be a decent source of protein. It also has lots of carbs in it. But so if you are vegan or vegetarian, no worries. You can still do very well. And again, it's real minor detail. You just probably actually need to increase your protein a little bit because it's harder to get all of the amino acids that you need. It's no big deal there. Carbohydrate, food quality, food composition basically means the glycemic index. So think of, you know, the carbs that taste really, really good, things that are really sweet, something like sugar, tends to be higher on the GI scale versus your more boring carb sources like rice, quinoa, sweet potatoes, oatmeal tend to be lower glycemic. Again, the GI, the glycemic index, is not a great thing because you can really easily manipulate it based on what other things you're eating. If you're eating other foods with carbs, it impacts it all. So nothing real crazy to worry about. If you are someone that trains longer than an hour, going pretty hard, or if you train multiple times in a day, you can actually enhance your enhance your performance, get more benefits from having higher GI carbs around your training. Again, it's not going to make or break anything, but if you are a really high level athlete, it can make a little bit of a difference. So for someone like Rich Froning, it's beneficial for him to have some workout carbs in his, you know, while he's training, sip on them while he's training, because he's going to be better set up to have a more productive second session later in the day. All right, and the last part of food quality is the types of fats that you eat. This is really just saturated fats versus not saturated fats. Simple, easy way to think of it. You want to get most of your fats from traditional healthy sources like nuts, olive oil, avocados. Get most of your fats from there. You can also eat saturated fats, of course. Those tend to generally come from more animal sources or things like grass-fed beef, butter, or coconut oil. General rule of thumb there, just don't go too crazy on eating those. If they're like about a third of your fat intake for the day, you're probably on the right track. No need to overcomplicate that. And that's food quality in a nutshell. About 5% of your diet success for body composition and performance, that is. When it comes to eating for general health, that amount goes up a little bit because when you want to eat for general health, turns out calorie balance is still really important, but just eating high quality foods makes you not overeat, right? So have you ever, you know, picture, you know, have you ever heard of anyone overeating from chicken, rice, and broccoli? No, of course not. It's almost impossible. So again, that's just a real quick, easy way to think of it. All right. And the last piece, nutritional priorities, supplements. Not very important at all, but what they are good at is being super, super convenient. Imagine you are a coach, you only have a few minutes between training clients. Boy, it is a lot easier to eat a bar or drink a shake than it is to sit down and eat a meal like chicken, rice, and broccoli. So they're super convenient, and there tends to be 5 main supplements that are really a lot of evidence behind them. We really know that they work and they've been around for a while, so we can feel very confident in recommending them. Whey protein, faster digesting protein, so it's something you might want to have more around training. So you get done with a workout, you know, you have some whey protein, probably a good idea to have then. The exact opposite of whey protein is casein protein, slow digesting. So it could be a good thing to have, let's say before bedtime, or let's say you're going to be stuck in meetings all day and you can't realistically eat for, 6 hours because you're at work all day. Having a casein shake before then could be a decent strategy to take. Supplement number 3, carbohydrate powders. Again, these are more for people that are training over an hour or training really, really hard or training multiple times a day. Again, it can be something as simple as a sports drink, Gatorade, Powerade. Man, almost every supplement company now creates something along those lines. Again, it doesn't have huge benefits if you're doing really short workouts or you don't have performance goals. So if you're just kind of training for general fitness, not really super important. And again, you might be better off not having a shake and eating more whole foods because it's going to help keep you more full, which is a great thing for when you're dieting and reducing calories. So that's number 3. Number 4, creatine monohydrate. It's been around forever, has lots of good evidence. That's also not to say it's going to make you feel like Superman in the gym. It's not. None of these supplements are. But it might just give you a tiny, tiny boost along the way. And again, if you think about tiny little boosts for months and years on end, lots of difference between, let's say, snatching 100 kilos versus snatching 105, 110 kilos in a year or two. So again, just small incremental progress is going to add up over time. That's essentially what supplements do. It's nothing that's going to make you feel like Superman. You're going to go in day one, lifting 50% over your previous maxes. It doesn't work like that. Sorry. Number 5, save the best for last, arguably. Doing this webinar for caffeine in kilos. Turns out the 5th supplement is caffeine. Most people take it. Almost everyone. Again, if you want to take a pre-workout, you can just crush coffee. Absolutely. That's essentially what pre-workouts are. They're loaded with a bunch of caffeine and maybe some other stuff that sort of actually makes you feel something like beta-alanine. You get some tingles, you feel good. You're like, wow, this pre-workout's really doing something. This is awesome. You can just have a big cup of coffee. It's going to just help you get a little bit more energy, a little bit more focus during training. Perfect. So those are kind of the main 5. There are some other ones probably on tier 2, something like beta-alanine. Boy, I can't even think of any other ones off the top of my head. But again, stick to those main 5 first, and you will be more on the right track. Again, 5% of your diet success supplements, but there's a reason so many of us take supplements. They're super convenient. And again, if you're driving, whatever, you're on the way to work in the morning, drinking a protein shake and some coffee or something like that, super, super easy to do versus sitting in your car trying to eat. Would not recommend that. We care about your health and safety. Don't do that, folks. So those are the nutritional priorities. I think I managed to keep that around 30 minutes, so I think we're pretty good there. I do have a couple other things that people almost always ask, so I have a couple questions that I'm going to hit first. And then if people want to ask questions, by all means, feel free to type them in. You can start taking them when they pop up. So, question number 1 that we almost always get. I don't think I've ever done a seminar where this question has not been asked. What about cheat meals? What about alcohol? We're all human, right? We all want to have free meals. I actually like calling them free meals. I hate the idea of cheat meals. I don't know. You're not cheating on yourself, are you? It's your own diet. How do you get around those? So, people have different metabolisms. People have different genetics. Some people might be able to have a cheat meal every single week and they will stay on their goals and they will consistently lose weight. Some people can do that. You probably know someone. You might get mad at them at times because they can eat whatever they want and they still lose weight. It's just a fact of life. Some people can. You might also know someone that if they look at junk food, they gain 5 pounds. If you're one of those people, it's probably not going to be recommended to have free meals consistently because, let's say you're dieting, you lose a pound or 2 in a given week, and then you have a free meal on Friday night, you're out with your friends, family, whatever, well, you gain those couple pounds right back. And then by Monday, you're back to where you started. You keep repeating that process. You never actually see results. So this is something that happens all the time. People feel like they're dieting all the time. Well, it's because they're probably not being as consistent as they could. So if you want to pick a voluntary diet phase where you want to lose weight, remember again, it's voluntary. No one's forcing anyone to diet. I've never met anyone forced to diet. If you are forced to diet, call 911. But again, it's a voluntary phase, set period of time, right? 2 to 3 months. Try to be more consistent, because where people get in trouble is they want the flexibility to eat whatever they want, but they also want results. Well, again, you're a grown up, you have to choose the trade off and balance that you're comfortable with. So keep that in mind. We're not saying you can't have free meals, but it's 100% up to the person, because someone might not be able to get results while doing that. Other people might be able to have 1 or 2 free meals every single week and they still lose weight, see results. It just depends on the person. Alcohol. This is going to come as a real shocker to people. The less you drink while dieting, the better results you will have. Boom, mind blown, right? I know I'm just blowing minds here. The less you drink, the better off you will be. It's common sense. Now, again, it goes back to the same idea as free meals. Can you have some drinks here and there? Oh, boy, I'm not your parents, or I'm not, your guardian, or, the whatever. Like, I'm not here to tell you not to drink, but again, you have to be okay with the choices and trade-offs that you make, because you might drink, you might have a crappy training session, you might not feel great the next day, you might not lose weight. All these things have to go into play, and you're a grown adult, you get to make those decisions for yourself. I'm not here to make those for you. Again, if you're someone that wants to drink a lot and quite often, boy, you'd better have realistic ideas on what your results are going to be like. You're not going to have great results. Sorry to break that to you. I don't think that's going to come as a shocker to anybody. But again, knowing that diets are short phases, they're voluntary phases, and we are human, we want to see results of our hard work, it's probably a better idea to avoid that stuff while dieting. If you're on maintenance, again, maintenance should be what you aim for most of the year. It's not dieting. Dieting by definition is not sustainable, because you're eating fewer calories than you need to meet specific goals for specific set timelines. That's the key, though. If you're a maintenance, you're just trying to maintain your body weight, which is where you should be most of the year. Man, by all means, you should totally enjoy some free meals with friends and family. You should have that freedom and flexibility to do that stuff, because that's sort of the joy of life, is eating and hanging out with friends that we like. And maybe that now during the pandemic, of course, maybe we're ordering takeout or whatever. But again, you should set yourself up to spend most of your time in maintenance, not necessarily dieting to try to lose weight. So hopefully that helps. Also, real interesting one. Some people, they can just have a little sliver of like cookies or cake, and that's all they need. They're totally okay with that. Other people, myself included, if I have a little bit, like if I have one Oreo, one golden double stuffed Oreo, that's my weakness. I'll admit it. I can't stop at one. I have to eat like 4 or 5, and all of a sudden 4 or 5 can turn into that entire row before you know it. Sort of this idea, it's called what the hell effect, where it's like you have a little bit and then you just throw up, and you're like, I don't mean throw up in the actual like blah. Don't do that, of course. That's terrible. I mean, you essentially you have a little bit, and the idea that you just throw caution to the wind and just go totally off track becomes a very real thing. So someone has a free meal out, they're like, oh, I can't track and measure stuff. Oh, I might as well not diet at all today. And then it becomes the weekend, and then it becomes a week, and then it's 2 weeks, and then it's a month. It's like, that's the what the hell effect. Don't get caught up in that. If you veer off course, it's totally fine. We're all human. We're all going to veer off course at times. If you veer off course, get right back on track at the next meal. No big deal. I think the best meme analogy I've ever seen is, if you get a flat tire, you don't pull over to the side of the road and take something sharp and jab all 3 of your other tires, right? It's like, no, you patch up that one tire and you get back on the road. Same thing happens with your diet or training plans. If you have one bad workout, you miss a workout, you don't skip the next week. You just get right back to it. Again, it all ties into the idea of cheat meals, alcohol, whatever you want to call it. Another really important part, I sort of already talked about a little bit, but when you get done dieting, the idea of maintenance. So anyone can lose weight. It's not really that hard, especially if you're doing really crazy or stupid stuff that's not sustainable. But what is hard, what is challenging, is losing weight and then maintaining it, right? So that's why we really stress the importance of weight maintenance. So what do you do after you get done with the dieting phase? Again, you want to, eat a little bit more than you were when you at the end of your diet. Now, you can't go back to eating what you were. Let's say you start at 200 pounds and you diet down to 180. Well, when you're 180, you can't eat the same amount that you did when you're 200 pounds. That's craziness. That's insanity. Somewhere in the middle, you have to find that middle ground. But typically what we tell people is you're going to gain 2 to 5 pounds at the end of your diet phase, that's totally normal. That's to be expected. You start eating a little bit more, you start eating more carbs, you start filling back up your muscle glycogen. That's all good stuff. It's no big deal, nothing to be worried about. You might just have to factor that in if you're in a weight class sport, because if you give yourself some leeway, time to maintain before a meet, you might have to know, let's say if you end up at 180, but you need to compete at right at 180, well, you might be a little bit over, which isn't really a big deal. But again, just something to sort of keep in mind for the long run. Weight maintenance is really important. You should totally be much more flexible, have a lot more freedom with the types of foods you eat, all that good stuff when you're doing that, because weight maintenance is really key. That's what sets up long-term success. It's great if you lose weight in 2, 3 months' time, but what do you do after that? Again, that's really important. So those are the main two that I have. All right, I actually just saw a question come in. All right, here we go. All right, I listened to your podcast with Dr. Case. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. That's the RP Strength Podcast. Whoop. I'm not quick enough to read that. I went away. I'm wondering if you have general extra guidelines for women cutting over 40. Yeah, here's the thing with, and this is for males too, anyone over 40. The good news is when you hit 40 years old, you don't all of a sudden lose the ability to get results. Again, maybe as you get a little bit older, it gets a little bit harder to lose weight, but I wouldn't say that's at the 40 mark. I would say that's probably well at the 50 plus mark. Now, again, will you be able to lose weight or get the same results at, 40, 45, 50 as you would when you were 20, 25, maybe even 30? Probably not. It's going to be a little bit harder. Now, again, a key there is consistently weight training your whole life. Hopefully, if you are, if let's say you're 40 now and you're sort of comparing yourself to when you're 30, well, if you've been lifting for that entire decade, you're going to have a lot more lean tissue. You're going to be in a much better position to get good results. The problem is, people tend to get less active as they age for whatever reason. They have kids, all that stuff. Well, that definitely plays a role in making it harder. And as you age, your metabolism does go down just a little bit. But if you are active, you stay lifting, you're reducing all that. So it's not nearly as hard as people think. Again, it sort of goes into mindset, right? And you have to have some self-belief. People like to sort of doubt themselves before they get started. Well, just being 40 years old or even 45, whatever, it doesn't mean you can't get results. It just might mean you have to work a little bit harder. That's it. Pretty simple. Again, like we have clients well into their 50s that are still doing very good. Especially in the world of CrossFit, they have masters athletes. You look at all these athletes, they're 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 60 plus. They're still in great shape. They're still seeing great results. Now, again, not all of us have to train, multiple hours a day to do all that. But again, there's no reason to think that you can't get results just because you're over 40. It just might be a little bit harder than, a decade ago. All right. Do we have any other questions? If you have questions, by all means, type them in. We'll just spend probably the next 10 minutes or so just doing questions. So I sort of knocked out all the ones that I have. I do have one more thing that I was going to talk about. So I'll do that in case if people want to type in questions as well, please, by all means, do. All right, here we go. How is having different macros on active or rest days helpful? So it just goes back to activity levels, right? If you're doing less, the requirements to eat go down. Now, again, this goes back to the idea of simplicity versus being a little bit more complex. Well, if you want optimal results, you can tweak things daily because your activity levels do change daily. So again, like you shouldn't eat the same amount as if you're training 2, 3 hours a day as you would on a rest day, or even if you're training an hour if you want optimal results, because you can optimize all that, of course. Now, the flip side of that is, well, maybe are we complicating things too much because you want to keep things simple? Well, we actually have something called simplified diet templates, and we design these for people that are new to macros, because what we found was there are some people out there that if they are sort of intimidated or scared by the idea of counting macros, they don't want to change their food intake on different days. It's just a little bit too much for them. They just want something really simple. We have options for simple. If you want simple, now again, simple comes with the slight trade-off. Some trade-offs are involved, of course, that you might not get quite as good results if you were optimizing everything based on your daily intake. So again, you can absolutely simplify things. And again, if your goal is more so general weight loss versus performance, you can totally simplify things and pretty much keep things the same every single day. Because again, there's something about consistency, getting in routine, establishing habits that might make that a little bit easier. But if you are a higher level athlete, you might want to start to fine tune things a little bit. So the other thing that I was going to talk about too, if people have questions, please keep typing them in. RP Diet app. So the RP Diet app basically allows you to set up your schedule where if you train at different times every day or have different activity levels or all of that good stuff, it literally does what I would do as a one-on-one coach, but it puts everything into an app. So you basically have AI coaching. So instead of paying $150, $200 a month for coaching, which, again, isn't for everyone, of course, you can literally use the RP Diet app, set up a diet. Again, it's going to be customized, your gender, your height, your weight, your body composition, your activity levels, how often you train, when you train. And it's also going to offer weekly adjustments based on the goals you set. Remember to set realistic goals. Don't go super crazy. Don't say, hey, I want to lose 30 pounds in 3 months. That's going to be a really hard goal to meet. And the app's going to give you a heads up on that. Be like, hey, this is probably unrealistic or going to be super aggressive. So again, you can literally do all this stuff in the app that you could do with Coach, but it literally like a 12th of the cost. And again, it's going to up. Essentially what happens, oh, here we go. All right, next one. We'll go into that question that just popped up. So again, the app is just a really good way to get coaching, but without having to pay for the expense of it. And again, it gives us a bunch of awesome sort of data, and then we can start making even better recommendations. So then we can sort of tell people, hey, you know what? If you're trying to lose 1% of your body weight per week, that's probably a little bit too aggressive. You might want to back that down to 0.5. So we can make some really cool recommendations from all that. Again, the app makes suggestions for you each week, based on your progress. It gives you the option, like, hey, you're not on track. It's probably time to reduce your food intake, and the app does all that for you. So really cool stuff. Just called RP Diet app in the app stores, Google, Apple store. You can get it. You can download it for free. It's free for 14 days if you want to try out. All right. Here we go. What would be an ideal meal replacement? Protein, whey, casein combination. What kind of combination? Yeah, that's really easy. So whey protein is fast digesting. Casein is slow digesting. If you want a good meal replacement, you just combine the two. So let's say you need, 40 grams of protein for a meal. Take 20 grams of whey protein, 20 grams of casein protein, combine them together, boom, you're good to go. Real simple and easy. All right, if people have more questions, feel free to fire away. Probably be here another 10 minutes or so. Another thing I was going to talk about too, didn't have this one written down, but just came to me, the types of foods that you can choose while dieting to help increase your chance of success. So, does anyone want to be hungry while dieting? No. That being said, will you be hungry while dieting to lose weight, to lose body fat? Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to lie and say you'll never be hungry. It's not setting realistic expectations. You have to go in with realistic expectations from the start. It's going to enhance your chances of success if you know what to expect. So, how do we limit hunger to the best of our abilities? We can use low density foods. So if you have 30 grams of carbs for a meal, let's call that one banana. That's not super filling. You might have that, and an hour later, you're really hungry. If you took 30 grams of carbs and you chose strawberries or watermelon or vegetables to fill those 30 grams of carbs, you're having, let's say, a banana for 30 grams of carbs, it's only this much food, or you're having literally an entire tub of watermelon. Which one's going to make you more full? Well, the one that you're having a ton more food volume. So that's a good way to set things up when you're dieting, is to sort of think about, well, what more filling foods can I choose? Sorry, just reading that question. It's probably just my ADD. I get distracted. But again, when you're dieting, choose foods that are going to fill you up more. So again, you wouldn't want to use things like oil necessarily, because you almost don't even know you're eating that and you're consuming those calories. So it might be better for your fats to, have nuts, have nut butters. Again, something that's just going to be a little bit more satiating for you. Again, on the flip side of that, if you're ever trying to gain weight, you kind of want to do the exact opposite. You might want to drink more of your calories because, and I know this seems crazy, but gaining weight can be really hard when you're trying to do it in a smart way, in a more scientific manner versus just eating everything in sight. But if you get to a point where you're having a really hard time gaining weight, which does happen, I know it seems crazy. And I've personally been there before. I've done sort of both ends of the extremes, but trying to gain a ton of weight, trying to lose a bunch of weight, it can be really hard. So you actually want to do things, you want to have really dense food choices. So again, why do you do that? Because it's less filling. And if you need to get in lots of calories to gain weight, that's a good way to do it. All right, so another question came in. Here we go. I found the app cuts carbs and doesn't touch fats. Should I fine tune that? No, you don't have to do that. Turns out what the app has done is it's already cut your fats down to minimum level, so it's not going to reduce it anywhere below that because it's probably not great for health if we go below those numbers. So the cool thing about the app is it's designed by PhDs, it's designed by registered dietitians and data scientists, so it has all these minimums built in, and it's not going to let you go below sort of quote unquote unsafe levels. So again, we talked about earlier when it comes to macros, about the lowest you want to go for fats is 0.3 grams per pound. That might actually be per pound of lean tissue. But again, the app takes care of all that for you. Literally, the reason you would use the app, or why people used to use the diet templates, before those became a little outdated, and now the app's much more in tune with everything, is that people don't want to think, right? Like it's totally cool to sit here and listen to this, or read the RP Diet 2.0 book, and you could totally create all of your own diet from it. But there's a difference between sort of having to do all the calculations yourself and doing all that thinking and fine tuning yourself versus just having literally an AI coach tell you exactly what to do. And that's the beauty of it. So again, instead of having to pay for expensive coaching, you can literally use this AI coaching that does everything that we do, just in an easier format. And again, it's on your phone. It's very simple and easy to use. Boom. There you go. You don't have to do any thinking. All right. So hang around here another minute or two. I'm sort of out of topics. I think I touched on everything that I wanted to talk about. I had a bunch of things written down, about 10 or so things. So yeah, if anyone else has questions, feel free to fire away. If not, we'll maybe call this. I know we're going on over 50 minutes, so it ended up being pretty good. I do want to say thank you for everyone for joining us. I think it'll be recorded, probably played on the Caffeine and Kilos YouTube channel. So if you want to send it to any friends to check out, please, that'd be great. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out, RP Strength, just rpstrength.com, or hit us up on the Instagram. Send us a DM or something if you have any other questions, or comment in, shoot us an email. Again, maybe check out the RP Diet app if you want to check that out. I think it's really cool. If you want to dive into a lot more of what I talked about today, nutritional priorities, you want to get more into maybe some myths, some fads, some fallacies, designing your own diet, we have free chapters of the RP Diet 2.0 book. Again, one more question came in. I'll get to that one in just a second. On our YouTube channel, there is a chapter by chapter breakdown of each chapter of the RP Diet 2.0 book done by my colleague, Dr. Mike Israetel. And if you like those, maybe pick up a copy of the book and get on like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever. But again, you can really take a lot more in depth. Man, I want to say this book it's over 300 pages, has tons of references. So if you are a bit more on the nerdy side, which I myself am, of course, and so are most people at RP, you can totally get into all the scientific evidence behind that. All right, here we go. What would be an optimal meal time before training? Oh, that's a good one. So it depends on when you're training. Usually you want to eat about an hour before. If you train real early in the morning, that's obviously not going to happen. So maybe you just have like a shake on the way, or you just sip on a shake on the way to your gym, so you get a little bit of something in your system, but without having to get up early. So let's say you train at 5 a.m. Does anyone want to get up at 3 a.m. to eat breakfast? No. That's just being realistic. No one wants to do that. So if you have a workout shake that you're taking with you, sip on that on the way to the gym. Again, it usually is going to have higher GI carbs, get into your system quicker, probably has some whey protein in it, gets into your system quicker. You have a little bit of something in your stomach, and it's not going to be so overwhelming that it's sloshing around or feeling really heavy. Like usually you can drink a little bit, probably not drink, don't chug the whole thing before you get into a really crazy hard Metcon or something. But that sort of the best of both worlds. You get a little bit of something, but without going overboard. If you are, let's say, you're training at 6 p.m., you could eat anywhere from 2 to 5 p.m. and be totally fine. The closer you get to training, you might want to scale back on the fat intake. You might want to scale back on the veggie intake a little bit because, again, you want stuff that's not going to sit heavy in your stomach while training. However, let's say you eat at 2 or 3 p.m. and you're not training until 6, so you have a couple hours. Well, you can have a more normal meal. You can have, some fats in it. You can have some veggies in that meal, of course, because you have plenty of time for that to digest a little bit without sort of sitting heavy in your stomach. So hopefully that helped answer it. Again, it just sort of all depends. The really interesting thing is any question ever asked about nutrition could almost always be answered with it depends. So it's hard to, without having some context, it's hard to really say definitively. But cool. Well, I feel pretty good about that. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to the fine folks at Caffeine and Kilos for hosting this. Coming up on about an hour, so I feel pretty good calling this. Again, if you have other questions, drop us an email, rpstrength.com, or the RP Instagram. We're always very good about replying to everything. So thank you again for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Thank you for taking your time to sit here and listen to me talk for almost an hour. Greatly appreciated. And best of luck to everyone on their health and fitness goals. We wish you all the best. We want you to be successful. So thank you very much. Have a great day.